DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one framework, one book. This daily masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is thinking less, performing better. I think anyone would like to perform better. Now, maybe you haven't thought of the concept of thinking less, but I'm going to connect all these together, or both of these rather, together here in today's episode. Before I get into explaining why we're even talking about this, first of all, let me remind you that I have a text line where I want you to text me and tell me the most valuable insight, best thing you got from today's episode, or a challenge or question you have about anything that I've shared. My number is 305-384-6894. Once again, 305-384-6894. Now, everybody wants to perform well. I think anyone who's listening to this show is called Work on Your Game. Even if you never heard of it before, you probably understand this has something to do with going out there and performing and doing your thing, whatever your game happens to be. And I think all of us would feel good if we can look good at the same time that we're performing well. And being that we're in a performance-based business and we get paid for performing, that performance-based business being just life in general, we all want to perform at at least an adequate level, and I think ideally a high level in whatever we do, so we're recognized as good and we can command and demand a lot of resources in exchange for our performance. I think everybody wants that. So one key to performing better that maybe you know about, maybe you thought of, maybe you have mastered, maybe you would love to master, is for you to not need to think so much when it is go time. In other words, when it's time for you to actually perform, maybe you don't need to think so much. And I talked about this in episode 1168. The title of that episode is How to Ignore the Talk When It's Time for You to Perform. And by the way, all of these episodes you can listen to if you just go to workonyourgamepodcast.com. You can listen to any episode that I reference, or you can just click the links that are provided down in the show notes of any episode of this show. So just scroll down wherever you're listening to this right now, and you'll see links to every episode that I reference. So the episode again was how to ignore the talk when it's time to perform. So that's ignoring the talk maybe from the crowd, the talk from your opponents, the talk from the naysayers, and also the talk coming from yourself. Because if you're self-conscious, thinking about what you've been saying to yourself, and also at the same time trying to perform, even if you perform well, even if you're better than everybody else in the room, you're probably not performing at your best. And as we get into today's topic, you'll understand why that is, why performing better and thinking less actually work hand in hand. So let's get into it so you understand. Point number one, again, the topic is think less, perform better. Always remember, this is the first point, that instincts are faster, smoother, and smarter than your conscious thinking. Now, while thinking is a skill, thinking is a job, it is a requirement. If you're going to get ahead in life, there are many points where you're going to need to engage your brain and actually do some thinking. But when it's time for you to perform, when it's time for you to act and turn that potential energy into kinetic energy, you are much better off letting your instincts take over, because your instincts fire faster than your conscious thinking. They work more smoothly. In other words, you don't appear so mechanical when you're working off instinct. Actually, when you're working off instinct, you don't appear mechanical at all. Everything just happens. It's almost like it's just naturally happening. It's quote unquote natural when you're firing off instinct. But when you're going off conscious thought, it's kind of like you have to think about what to do, then you do it, then you think about it again, then you do it. It's more mechanical and it's obvious. You can feel it yourself. And you could even see it in yourself, and other people can read it off you when you're going off your conscious thinking. And another thing about your instincts is that they're smarter than your conscious thoughts. And what I mean by that is your instincts know what you need to do without you needing to pause and think about it. And I heard somebody say, this was a couple weeks ago, I saw someone say on social media that intelligence, or what we call intellect, or somebody being smart, is not about whether you know something versus not knowing something. This person posited that intellect is really about just how quickly you process things. Because anyone, and this is what the person was saying, and I'm paraphrasing their idea here. I don't know if they even went this far, but I'll go further in explaining what I believe they were trying to say, is that anyone could acquire a certain amount of knowledge if you give them an infinite amount of time to figure it out. But a smarter person, or the smarter the person, the faster they can figure something out, as opposed to someone who is not as smart as them. They'll figure it out, but they need a little bit more time to get to it. It's like kind of like the processing speed. It's like when you have a smartphone and you still have the old version of the phone, then a new one came out, like on the iPhone, for example. We know the phones start to slow down when they put out the new operating systems, but you still have the old phone and you're like, damn, my phone got slow as hell. And then when you go get the new phone, it's so fast, you're like, damn, I didn't even realize phones could be this fast anymore. Or a computer. You have an old computer with an old operating system or an old processor, old relative to what's out right now. The computer works, but it just works kind of slowly. You get a new computer, things just work so much quicker. So it's not that being smarter means all of a sudden you know things that you didn't know. It just means that you can access and utilize information at a much faster pace when you're going off instinct. So that's what I'm referring to here when I say instincts are smarter than your conscious thinking. You can tell when somebody is overthinking versus when they're just flowing and letting their skills work for them. Have you ever been in that situation yourself? First of all, I'll ask, you ever been in that situation where you were just consciously overthinking everything that you were doing and you felt very self-conscious about what you were doing, and thusly all your actions, your movements, even your thoughts were very mechanical? If you ever been in that space, you know what I mean. And then when you think about a situation, which you also know, when you are just going off of instinct, when you are just allowing things to happen, it's kind of flowing. You're not really thinking about what you're doing. You're just doing things, but you're doing it smoothly and you're actually getting the results that you want. That's when you're going off of instinct. And we've all been in that space before. And oftentimes when we're doing things off of instinct, we're not even consciously aware that we're doing things off instinct, because in order to be aware of it, we had to be consciously thinking. So you think of the times when you're not self-conscious and you're just doing your thing and it's going the way that you want it to go and you're not really thinking at all. Maybe you have to look back on a situation to even realize that that was the case. You can notice a distinct difference between when you're consciously thinking about what you're doing versus when you're doing things off of instinct and letting your skills just work for you. It's this nonverbal communication that we have with ourselves and that other people can see in us that is very obvious. Your movement is more natural. Your movement's less inhibited, as I talked about already. And when you act off instinct, you do things sometimes that you might not even know that you could do when you're just going off of instinct. When you're not overthinking and you get into a state of flow, or you get into, in sports, you often hear people talk about getting into the zone, which I did a section on that in my book, Work on Your Game, and also in Bulletproof Mindset course, we talk about the zone. When you get into that state of the zone, you just do things, it feels natural, it looks natural. Even if you look back on the situation after the fact, you're like, man, I don't even know how I did that. It just naturally happened. That is what it feels like and looks like when you're going off of instinct. Things that, again, had you needed to think about doing them before you did them, you might have blown the opportunity and lost the opportunity, because by the time you consciously thought about it, the opportunity to do it was gone, or B, you never would have consciously thought about doing it because it wasn't even something that you thought you were capable of doing until you did it. Then when you did it, then you could be like, damn, I didn't even know I could do that. And there are many situations with someone like myself coming from a sports background. I've heard many athletes give that account of situations where they just did something iconic, or they did something that gets remembered, or they made some big play in some sports competition, and then they get asked about it later on. They're like, man, I wasn't even thinking. It's just something that naturally happened, just flowed out of me in the moment. I think of Michael Jordan in the 1992 NBA Finals, when in the game one of the series, Michael Jordan just makes all these three-pointers. Now, Michael was not known as a big-time three-point shooter. Actually didn't shoot a lot of three-pointers. Shot a lot of jump shots, but a lot of them weren't three-pointers. And then game one of that series, it looked like the Portland Trailblazers' game plan was to let Michael shoot three-pointers, because that was, of everywhere on the floor that Michael liked to score, maybe that was the weakest area of his game statistically, so they let him shoot. But Michael was just in such a state of flow, such in the zone, that he was making all these three-pointers. And then he looked over at Magic Johnson and Marv Albert, who were broadcasting the game for NBC, and he did the famous shoulder shrug, like he didn't know. And he talked about later on, after the Bulls won that championship that year, how he was just in the zone. In that moment, he was just making shots, doing something that he wasn't known for doing. And I don't think ever again in his career did he make that many three-pointers in a game. It was just the moment of what he was talking about. In performance, anytime you're performing, and whether that's just talking to somebody, whether it's playing in a basketball game and the biggest stage in your industry, anytime you're performing, instincts beat conscious thought in every single area. So now that I have indoctrinated you and sold you on the idea that you want to be performing off your instinct and conscious thought, let's move on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is thinking less to perform better. When you are prepared and confident, there is nothing that you need to think about anyway. If you already know what your game is, you already have prepared ahead of time for what might happen, what's going to happen, what you need to do, what your contingency plans are, what your strategy is, what the different options are going to be for what you're doing. Again, if you think of an athlete playing in a sport, you can't always predict exactly what the opponent is going to do, like a boxer in a boxing match or a tennis player or a basketball team. You can't predict everything that the opponent is going to do, but you can be reasonably prepared for what's going to go on. You know how your team needs to execute. You know what plays you want to run. You know how you like to serve the ball. You know what punches you want to throw. You know what plays your football team is going to run. When you're prepared and you're confident in your preparation, confident in your skills, confident in your ability, confident that you can come out victorious, there's nothing that you need to think about anyway. What do you need to think about? You already know everything you need to know as far as the performance goes. You know that you can't predict exactly what your opponent's going to do. You're going to have to react in the moment. So it's not about you memorizing an exact plan. All right, if they do this, then I'm going to do this. That's thinking. That's conscious thinking. That's too slow. In a moment, you won't have opportunity for that. But there's nothing that you need to think about. Even if something goes off script or something goes wrong, if you even want to call it that, if something doesn't go according to plan, your instincts will have you confident enough to handle that left turn where you were expecting a right turn. You'll be able to handle that on the spot and keep going. Even though you didn't see it coming, even though you didn't know this was going to happen, you're able to deal with it in the moment. I don't think Michael Jordan predicted in that 1992 NBA Finals game that the Portland Trail Blazers were going to leave him open 6 times to shoot three-pointers and he was just going to shoot them all and they were all going to go in. I don't know if he could have predicted that. Maybe he had some idea that the Trail Blazers were going to let him shoot threes, but I don't think, even knowing that, I don't think Michael Jordan went a week before the NBA Finals and just said, all right, let me just practice shooting three-pointers and not practice all the other areas of my game that made me recognized as the best player out here. Let me just all of a sudden focus on this other thing that's not even one of my main things. I don't think he did that. I think Michael just knew, listen, I'm going to take what the defense gives me. I'm going to let the game come to me. If it's a three-pointer, I'll shoot a three-pointer. If it's feeling good, then I'll shoot it. And if I'm feeling good with the first one, then I'll shoot another one. That's feeling good. I'll keep shooting them until it's not feeling good anymore. And he did it that one game. The rest of the games in the series, that was a 6-game series, he didn't shoot that many threes in any of the other games after that. So it was just the moment that he was dealing in. And it's not like Michael Jordan was trying to become Stephen Curry 20 years before Stephen Curry in that moment. He just took what was given to him then. He didn't know exactly what they were going to do or exactly how he was going to feel. But what if he would have missed his first three-point shots in that game? He probably would have did something different. So again, it's not like he predicted and said, all right, this is exactly what I'm going to do no matter what. So even when something goes not exactly as you thought it might go, your instincts leave you confident enough to handle it in the moment and figure it out on the spot as you go. So for any of you who's ever had the objection before performing or before positioning yourself to perform or saying, well, I need to have everything in order first, or I need to be fully prepared, or I got to make sure that I have my script in place or my plan in place. I got to know what my full strategy is before I start doing anything. What I'm sharing with you here is to help persuade you that no, you don't need to have everything in place. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to have a full strategy laid out before you start doing something, because even if you do have a full strategy and a full plan in place, when you get out there, the real life is always going to alter the lab test anyway. So you need to just know what your skills are, be confident in your ability to deal with the things that you didn't know were going to come, and then you deal with them in the moment. Because again, as I said in point number 1, when you are going off of instinct, you will respond and react and do things that you didn't even know you could do until you got in the moment and did them. And these are things you will never learn just in preparation, just in planning, just in some controlled environment where everything is going exactly as expected. So there is a balance that needs to be struck between preparation and actually putting yourself in a live situation and having to perform. It's kind of like my friend Shota, who's a boxing trainer. He talks about this. He says, boxers go through boxing training, and then any of you who's ever done any boxing training or you've done any boxing yourself, and when you watch somebody who is training for boxing, you just watch a video of somebody who's training for boxing. Here's the interesting thing. If you really think about it, when they're training, every punch they throw hits something, right? They're hitting a punching bag, or you're working with a trainer, you're hitting the mitts, or every punch you throw, you're hitting a speed bag. Every punch you throw, you're hitting something. Every punch is actually landing. But when you get into an actual boxing match, any of you who has ever watched a boxing match, or any of you who's ever actually been in a boxing match, you notice something. In a real boxing match, every punch you throw is not going to land and hit the opponent. If every punch you throw is hitting the opponent, it's probably going to be a quick fight. And that's I don't know who you're fighting. What are you fighting against? A mailbox? That's probably not going to happen in a real boxing match. So in a real boxing match, Shota was explaining to me, even in training, you're hitting everything 100%. But in a boxing match, you're missing most of the punches that you throw. And it could actually hurt your confidence because you're used to hitting everything. But then you get in a match and you're not hitting anything. You might think something is wrong with you. So this is why you have to strike the balance between doing the training where everything is controlled and you know exactly how it's going to go and everything seems to be looking pretty good, and then get into a real environment when it absolutely isn't like that. So are you prepared to go off script? Because real life will always go off of the script. It will always divert from the script that you have laid out in your mind. As the saying goes, and it's fitting that I brought up boxing here, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. And I've seen different people credited with saying that, so I'll just say it's a saying. Or one saying that I'll say is everyone has a plan until something doesn't go according to the plan. And that's usually how it works in life. So while preparation can, of course, help with this, because you can have your plan in place, don't let your preparation become doctrine. Because when your preparation becomes doctrine, now you're married to one plan. And then as soon as one thing doesn't go according to your script, now you have no idea what to do. Now you're in no man's land. So know your plan, but be ready to throw that plan completely away and do whatever the situation calls for as necessary, because that will happen. Moving to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is think less, perform better. Here's the question then. How do you actually do this? How can you train yourself to think less and perform better? On top of what I've already told you. I've already told you the key is that you want to get yourself ready to play off of instinct. So first of all, you need to go check episode number 1003, where the topic is how to prepare yourself to play, quote, off of instinct, close quote. How do you actually get ready to go out and just do stuff without having to think, without having to second guess yourself? And you can just do it just in a way that it seems to flow completely naturally, like you're not even thinking about it and it's just happening in the moment, even though you didn't know it was going to happen. There is a way to do that. Again, episode 1003 will tell you how. And also check episode 943, where I talk about the required tools for developing your killer instinct in life. Now, maybe not all of you is looking to develop what they call the killer instinct. Maybe you don't want to kill anything. But understand the killer instinct is not about beating another person. It's not about any type of even a negative energy. The killer instinct is just your willingness to seize opportunity. Your willingness to be aggressive, defined as to go after something boldly, and directly. That's what killer instinct means. So all of us need that on some level, even though you might not consider yourself to be any kind of killer on any level. The keys to being able to think less and actually perform better through thinking less are the preparation, doing the work, and those are kind of the same thing, preparing ahead of time, doing the work ahead of time, mental work, emotional work, physical work, planning work. Practice clearing your mind. This is also part of your work, so that when you get into the situation, you don't have to think and you don't have to even tell yourself to clear your mind, because you've already trained yourself to clear your mind. 2 ways to do that are through meditation and yoga, 2 practices that many people partake in. I do both every single morning. Actually, the first thing I do every single morning after I drink a liter of water. These are things that are practices for you relaxing yourself, centering yourself, and clearing your mind so that you're not consciously thinking about anything when you're doing these things. Now, I wouldn't even say that I'm perfect at these, and many people who do them are not perfect at them. That's why they are called practices. All right? There's no meditation science. There's no yoga science. They're called a practice because you're always evolving and always getting better at doing them, which is why you do them on a consistent basis. But if you practice meditation every day at the same time, in the same way, the same amount of time. When you get into a situation where you need to clear your mind, you will be able to do it on call because of the practice that you've done every single day. So you practice so that when you get in a game situation, quote unquote game situation called life, you're able to do it without, going all over the place and losing your centeredness and losing control. Also see episode number 1781, where I talked about how to detach yourself emotionally from the results of what you're doing so that you are not pressing to get the result, and you can just allow your instincts and let your game take over, let you flow. Of course, you want the result, but you don't want to be pressing for the result, because when you're pressing for it, then you start trying too hard, and then your conscious thought, which is very slow and clunky compared to instinct, starts to get in the way. So again, you look back at somebody like a Michael Jordan or any high-performing athlete, of course they want to win the game. That's the reason that you play the game. That's the reason you practice and get ready and dedicate your whole life to your sport and all of that. But when you get into the game situation, you can't be so tensed up about trying to win that if you're so tensed up trying to win, then what it does is it blocks your instincts and you start constantly thinking about everything that you're doing. It actually slows you down and it makes you perform worse. So while of course you want to win, you want to emotionally detach from the need to win while you are in the moment of performing. You will get to the win anyway because you're trusting your instinct, you're trusting the work you've done ahead of time. It will happen on its own without you having to force it. All that said, recapping today's class, which is think less, perform better. Since all of us want to perform well and we want to look good doing it, we're in a performance-based business. Here's how you can actually start doing that. Point number one, remember that instincts are faster, smoother, and smarter, meaning they process more quickly than conscious thought. You could tell when you are overthinking because everything feels and looks mechanical from the outside looking in. That nonverbal communication, people can see it in you and you can probably even notice it in yourself. When you're going off of instinct, you are less inhibited. You don't need to think about things. You just do them, even stuff that you didn't even know you could do, because you're allowing your instinct to take over. There are tools and abilities available through your instincts that are not available through the conscious thoughts that you actually can see yourself having. Point number two, when you're prepared and confident, you don't need to think about anything. And when you're prepared and confident, your instincts will control things and you'll be able to handle stuff even that you didn't see coming. As the saying goes, everyone has a plan till they get hit in the mouth. My saying is everyone has a plan so something doesn't go according to that plan. So preparation, of course, can help with this. Don't allow your preparation to become doctrine to where everything has to go according to plan in order for you to be able to execute, because things will not go according to plan. Real life always alters the lab test. And point number three, how do you actually start doing this? I'm going to refer you to a couple episodes. Number 1003, how to prepare yourself to play off of instinct. Number 943, required tools for developing your killer instinct. And episode 1781, to be emotionally detached from the results of your actions. Also, look into the practices of meditation and yoga, two things that will help you prepare for the moments when you do need to clear your mind. The more you practice it, the better you'll be able to call on it on the spot and be able to do it in the moment. I want you to text me at my number 305-384-6894. Tell me the most valuable insight, the best thought or idea or golden nugget that you got from today's episode. 305-384-6894. Work on your game. Dre all